Alright, hello again. This is Jeff Scott of Blackhawk Technical College, and as mentioned, I am going to be going over the first 6 chapters of the Sam's Teach Yourself AngularJS, JavaScript, and jQuery all in one text, which is the text I'm using for both 152, 167 Ajax and JavaScript website development and 152, 164 design and implementation projects for the spring 2016 semester at Blackhawk Technical College. So right now I'm going to go over Chapter 1, which in many ways is your kind of prototypical beginning chapter to a textbook. As you can see, it's entitled Introduction to Dynamic Web Programming, and as far as the material that's in here, we've got 5 different objectives. Getting ready for creating dynamic web pages, creating an Angular, jQuery, and JavaScript friendly development environment, adding JavaScript and jQuery to web pages, constructing web pages to support jQuery and JavaScript, and finally creating your first dynamic web pages with jQuery and JavaScript. Again, please be cognizant of the fact that I have in here I have all of the source code for the book is on there, so I'm going to probably be talking about it, but I'm not going to be probably typing in very much. Alright, the big thing about this class and what you're supposed to get out of it, regardless of whether it's the 167 or the 164, is the dynamicity, the interactivity that JavaScript is today bringing to web pages. Alright, people don't want old-fashioned websites with static text that doesn't change. Alright, they want interactive text that changes often, that has them feel involved, etc. So, as mentioned, the lesson quickly takes you through the world of jQuery and JavaScript website development. So there's quite a bit of talk in here about web servers and web browsers, etc. The lesson, as it says, includes several sections that give a high-level overview of web server and browser interactions and the associated technology. Then they talk about setting up and configuring AngularJS, jQuery, and JavaScript. This book supposes that you are going to use for your jQuery, JavaScript, Angular website environment. It assumes that you're going to use Eclipse and Node.js. Eclipse for your editor and Node.js for your environment. I'm going to use neither. I'm going to use XAMPP for the environment, and for the editor I'm just going to use not an IDE like Eclipse is, but I'm going to just use Notepad++. If you want to follow the steps in the book, and if you want to use Node.js, and or if you want to use Eclipse, that's fine. I'm just not going to do that. So, to start with, understanding the web server and web browser paradigm. As it says, JavaScript, jQuery, and AngularJS can interact with every major component involved in the communications between a web server and a browser. So this section presents a high-level overview at this. So the first thing that's discussed in here is the web server. And as mentioned, it's the most critical component of the web. If you don't have a web server, you don't really have an environment where information is available to everyone. Now, what I'm going to use in here, and this will be a little bit of review for some of you, and some of the rest of you maybe you've never seen it before. But what I have right here is this is the virtual desktop. And if you click Start and you go to All Programs and you go down to the very bottom, you'll see XAMPP. And if I click XAMPP, you'll see down there I've got a couple things, and they look kind of like an orange background with a dog bone on it. We want the XAMPP control panel. So if I click on that, that starts up XAMPP. Again, this will be the environment that we will be using. And if I click here, which is really the only one I have to click, but if I click here and I click there, now I've got the ability, if I so desire, to use both Apache, the Apache web server, and the MySQL relational database management system. Now I don't want to close this, but I just want to minimize it. So it's up and running right now. So that's my environment. All right, I'll show you later what the author shows as far as setting up an environment. The reason that I'm using XAMPP is it is a graphical environment, whereas Node.js that the author has you use is basically command line. So a lot of things happen between the time you key in something, some kind of a web address into the browser, and you hit enter, and the time you get information back. Depending on the website, as mentioned here, a lot of things can happen on the web server. It can check for the format and the validity of a request. If I spell Blackhawk incorrectly and I put in backhawk.edu, chances are pretty good I'm going to get nothing back, but maybe a 404 file not found error or something like that. All right, depending on, again, what site you're going on to, they may check for security to verify that you have the ability to go and look at what you want to look at. To build the response, the server may interact with several components, even other servers, all over the world in order to give you back what you want. So without a web server, there is no real web. Now, just so you know, when we're in here and we're using XAMPP, it is a web server, but it's allowing us to use our own machine as both a standalone machine and as a web server. So it's not a web server that's connected to the outside world, but it's a web server that's our own machine. All right, so it's very stripped down, in other words. The next most important component is mentioned there is the browser. Excuse me. As mentioned, the browser sends requests to the web server and then displays the results to the user. If you haven't heard these acronyms before, well then shame on your instructor, but it's HTTP. In fact, let's put it in caps. So you sit there at your address bar in the browser. So this is the browser request. And this is the web server response. So what's happening through this is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or HTTP, is used so that when you, as a user, key something into the address bar in your browser and you hit enter, a request is sent out using the Hypertext Transfer Protocol that ideally will be answered by a web server someplace. That web server will gather the information that you asked for, if you have the permission to do it and if you asked for it in a correct way, and then it'll respond accordingly, typically by sending information back to the browser that will eventually have to be converted into some kind of HTML so that the browser can realize it. All right, now that's in a nutshell, and that's probably even more than they give right here. There are several browsers available. The three most popular are Chrome, Internet Explorer, and Firefox. I'm going to use Chrome almost exclusively in here. All right. As mentioned, JavaScript, jQuery, and Angular can be involved in the transactions that occur between the browser receiving the response and the final output rendered for the user. So a lot of stuff can happen. All right. One of the things that's important to realize as far as what's happening in here is the DOM, and we'll talk about the DOM in later chapters, but DOM again is an acronym for Document Object Model. It's a tree-like structure that shows your HTML document in all of the components that it has. Now this is a very simplistic view. It doesn't usually show like this, but if I go out, for example, to Google Images, and in here I go into Images and I type in Document Object Model, and I think I spelled document wrong, or the DOM, and if I put that in there, there's a bunch of pictures of it, and some of them are going to be in more depth and breadth of coverage than others. All right, but let's see. I guess we'll try this one right here. So this would be your HTML document. So there's your tag at the top. The HTML document has two children, the head and the body. The head has three children, the title, the meta, or a couple meta tags. Probably down here you'd also have T tags for each one of these, which means text. The body has three children. It has an H1, a paragraph, and an unordered list. The paragraph has an A tag in it, a hyperlink tag, and the unordered list has three LI tags in it. The point is, this stuff is created for you behind the scenes by the system. You don't ever really see it yourself, but you are able to go in there and actually do some modification using the DOM to really start to unleash the power of web programming. You need to understand the DOM. You need to also understand things like browser events. As an example, when a page is loaded, a page load event takes place. When you click your mouse, a mouse click takes place. All right, as it says, these events are available to JavaScript, allowing you to execute functionality based on what's happened, when it happened, how it happened, who did it, etc. All right. There's also the browser window, as mentioned right here, and it provides access to the browser itself. We'll talk about that, but just not right now. All right, I have to stop for literally just a second here. We'll start back up in just a second. All right, sorry about that. So the next component here is the URL, which is the Uniform Resource Locator. Basically, it's the address that you type into the browser address bar. You hit enter, and that address gets converted into some kind of an IP address, Internet Protocol address, that is connected to a server someplace. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on in that. Most of it I understand, but I'm not really the person to explain it to you. All right. As it says, Hypertext Markup Language, or HTML, provides one of the basic building blocks of a web page. You know, you took a class in this last semester. All right. So here's an example of a simple HTML page right here. I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to do anything with it, but you all should be able to look at that and understand what it means. Now let's suppose for a second that there's one or more of you who did not take the 119 class and or you did not take the 157 class. If that happened to be the case with you, then what you really should do is go out to w3schools.com, and under w3schools.com you've got a lot of stuff. There's a lot of tutorials underneath there. So if I go to tutorials, all right, there are HTML tutorials, there are HTML5 tutorials underneath here, there are JavaScript tutorials under here, there are jQuery tutorials under here, there's even an AngularJS tutorial under there. All right, so I can go to Learn HTML, and there's an HTML5 tutorial. All right, I can go over here again, and I can go to JavaScript, and there's a JavaScript tutorial. I can go over again to jQuery, there's a jQuery tutorial. And finally, I can go over to AngularJS, and there's an AngularJS tutorial. So there's a lot of stuff that's available to you. So if you're having a problem with the way I'm presenting things, hopefully that won't be the case, or whatever, all right, there are other resources for you. And of course there's other things than that too. All right, so that's a simple HTML document which will register or resonate like this right here. Well, that's not very nice looking, so typically not only on a web page do you have HTML, or really HTML5, which is the newest version of HTML, you have CSS. All right, and CSS provides the aesthetic value for a website. So there's a simple HTML file, and you put it in there, and notice the difference. All right, we've put graphics in there, maybe not the best graphics, but you can see graphics that are in there that have check marks before each of the planets that we saw. So we replace those little discs, the little round filled in circles, with check marks. And the text is also bigger. Okay? I already mentioned the HTTP protocol. As it says, it defines the communication between the browser and the web server. It defines the type of request that can be made, the format of those requests, and then the HTTP response. Now, not only is there HTTP, there's HTTPS, which is HTTP with a secure socket layer, which adds additional security. If you've ever noticed, if you've ever gone out and bought anything on a website, that your protocol will change from HTTP to HTTPS. I probably have shown this, if you've taken classes from me before, you've seen this before, but if I go out to Amazon.com, and let's say I want to buy a book. All right. So if I go out there, you'll notice that it's where I'm at right now is at www.amazon.com. Really, I'm at HTTP right here. http://www.amazon.com. That's really where I am. And notice though, if I go out to my shopping cart, that it changes immediately to HTTPS because it puts that secure socket layer on there. And it's doing that to try to provide for me, all right, a certain amount of security. As it says here, when the web browser connects with the web server via HTTPS, they talk about certificates and some other things. Okay? All right. Now, if I go out to, let's see, I know this isn't a great example right here, so I want to give you a better one. If I go out to Blackhawk's site, so if I go out to blackhawk.edu, all right, and once I'm out there, I'm going to check the, presidential search. That's not what I want to show you. I want to show you something better than that. So let's see. This is just pushing me off to other pages. I was hoping I would be getting something else up here other than being pushed off to other pages. They're actually doing a much better job in the way they're writing the website as opposed to the way it used to be written. In fact, let's try the one that I had just shown you. Okay, let's go out here to Amazon. All right, so if I'm here at Amazon and I go out to books, and under books I'll type in jQuery. All right, so let's say it shows me these jQuery books, and I'm starting to look through them, and I think, oh, well, this one looks pretty good, this jQuery pocket reference. All right, so I come in there and I click on it. All right, now what you may or may not be able to tell is there's a bunch of stuff in here now. It says Amazon.com jQuery pocket reference. It's got the author's name, David Flanagan. It's got probably the ISBN number, but then it's got a bunch of other stuff here. It's got a question mark with a bunch of other stuff that's after it. All right, so it says that it's books, etc. There's a bunch of junk in here. This represents what's referred to as a query string. So a query string is stuff that actually gets appended onto my URL that's got extra information for the web server. All right, and you'll notice that even when I was right here, it had this URL. It says, oh, I was looking for books with a keyword of jQuery. But you'll notice if I go back again into my shopping cart and I start to come in here and I say proceed to checkout, I don't want this, I've already bought this book. But if I come out there and do that, what's going to happen is it's not going to show the extra information in here. Why? Because the information that it would ask if I proceeded to the checkout would be personal information, my credit card number, my different the number itself, the verification code on the number, the expiration date on the number, maybe my information as far as what my address, etc. is. Well, that's personal information. So that stuff is not shown there. So the personal stuff, rather than being shown there, all right, that's shown in what's called an HTTP header. And actually it's hidden in an HTTP header. So bottom line, long story short, short story long, whatever, you've got a GET request and you've got what's called a POST request. With a GET request, you're asking for information. You're showing information, but you can't change the information. So in the stuff I just showed you, like for example, the stuff that's, let's just say right there. Anything that comes after that question mark, that's information about this book. It's showing it to me, but I can't change that information. All right, but it's not personal information. So a GET request is used to retrieve information from a web server, but not that you're allowed to change it. And it's all retrieved via key value pairs. So as mentioned there's your URL, then a question mark, then a key equals followed by a value, and if there's more than one, ampersand, another key equals, and a value, etc. So they show an example right here. So this would say that the key would be gallery and the value would be 01 in this case. All right, but that's for information that you can't change, and it's for impersonal information. A POST, on the other hand, is for data that's not attached to a query string. It's data that's hidden in an HTTP header because it at least potentially has personal information in it. All right? All right, so web server and client-side scripting, again, initially, web pages were static. We already have talked a little bit about that. I mentioned that to you before. And I also mentioned that that's not the way that it is today. All right? Today, we want to have client-side scripting. Typically, as it says, it's the process of sending JavaScript code along to a web page. The advantages? Processing is done at the server side. Stuff is handled locally. So in other words, if I'm filling out a form, and I'm filling out a form on, if I'm filling out a form on my browser, and I go and I forget to fill out a field, and I go and I hit a send button, before it goes and sends it out to a server, it's going to check and make sure that all the fields that were required were filled in. And if I missed one, rather than sending it to the to a web server, which would waste the web server's time and processor power, it'll be validated on the browser, and it can come back and tell me that there was an error and try to fix it. But you can't do everything on a client. All right, if you want interaction, if you want to be able to buy things or whatever, all right, as it says, you'll need to use a server. Okay, there are server-side templates and there are Ajax request handlers. Well, not this semester, but during the fall 2016 semester, you'll learn PHP, you'll learn ASP.NET, which are two of the more popular server-side template languages. Again, as mentioned, the advantages of working with those is that all the processing is done on the server and data is never directly transferred across the internet. The disadvantage it provides, you need a server. Okay? Now, there's another way that you can do a wide variety of things without having to bring the server into it as much, and that's by using something that's called Ajax. Ajax is an acronym that stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. It allows you to do partial page refreshes. I've shown this to several people before. This isn't the gee whiz type of thing, but if I go out to familyvideo.com, and once I'm out there, I go out to somewhere here is going to have new releases, new release rentals. All right, so if I go out there and I take my mouse and I put it over Mississippi Grind, notice what happens. I get a description over here that has what the movie is about. Once I move off of it, it goes away. If I go out to the next one, same kind of thing happens. What I'm doing there is what's referred to as a partial page refresh. So the system is giving me information on an as-needed basis. So there's a couple different examples that are here. All right, and I'm not going to go over the examples now because I think this is way too early in the process to do this. But what we have here is, they say, a simple JavaScript client script that executes an Ajax request. So you need a server for this to work. And if you put all that stuff in, what's going to end up happening is it's going to look almost identical to what we saw in the first thing that was there with the list of planets that were in the bulletized list. But the difference is we're doing something. You need to run this on a server, okay? And again, we'll go over plenty of examples as we go on in here. All right, so the IDE that the book uses, again, the integrated development environment is, they use Eclipse. I'm not going to. The web server they're going to use is Node.js. I'm not going to. The development browser they're going to use are whatever one they're comfortable with. I'm using Firefox. So they have a thing in here that tells you how to set up Node.js. I'm not going to do this, but feel free to do it if you want to. You can go out to http:// etc. I did set it up on the machine. I did go through all the steps. All right. And they tell you that if you want to see this in action, so to speak, and I've got it on the virtual desktop, so I can run it right now. So what they say is you should, come on, close, is they tell you to come in here and bring up, my machine's freezing up. But what they tell you to do is to come in here. Well, I want to show you, but I can't right now because, like I said, that machine's frozen. And it has kicked me off the virtual desktop. Okay, well, there's a problem with the virtual desktop, so I won't show it to you now, but I'll have to show it to you in class. But I was able to do this stuff that they show here. The configuring Eclipse as a web development IDE, you can read that on your own if you're so inclined, but again, I'm not going to use this. There's nothing wrong with using Eclipse as your IDE and using Node.js. I'm just going to use what I'm more comfortable using. All right, and that'll also help you with other classes that you're taking. All right, okay. So the next thing that's in here is creating a dynamic web page with jQuery and JavaScript rather. So let's take a look at what's in here. All right, this is a very simplistic little program. And if you notice, there's all of our HTML right there. We have a simple span in here that says, click me. That's all that's in here. Then we add some CSS so that that span ends up looking like a button. All right, kind of like this. Then we add some JavaScript in here, the dynamicity. And what we say is when you take your mouse and you try to put your mouse over the button that says click me, have the button move someplace else on the screen in a random fashion. Okay? So the whole program is shown right here. And I don't know if I have it. Let's see. I don't know if we can run this one without a server or not, but I'll try it. So lesson 1, and it's so you can see what's happening when I try to put my mouse on it. Okay, it's moving around. Okay, that's pretty much it for the first chapter. So I'm going to come back in a few minutes with chapter 2.